The air over the East China Sea near Okinawa in the spring of 1945 was a lethal arena, a swirling chaos of screaming engines, tracer fire, and falling metal. The island was the last bloody stepping stone to Japan itself, and the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy were throwing everything they had left, including pilots on their suicidal missions into its defense. For American fighter pilots in their rugged P-51 Mustangs and FU Corsairs, each sortie was a brutal test of skill and endurance against an enemy increasingly desperate and willing to die. But on one particular mission, the abstract, high-speed ballet of aerial combat collapsed into something primal, intimate, and astonishingly anachronistic. This is not the story of a famous ace with dozens of kills, but of an encounter so raw and personal that it stripped away the technology of 20th century warfare and reduced a conflict to two men face to face. On a muddy hill, it was a day when a dogfight at 20,000 feet descended into a duel on the ground, where a .45 caliber pistol met a family katana, and the horrific idea of a warrior's final stand became terrifyingly real. Our story crystallizes around a specific, though not universally documented, engagement often referenced in veterans' accounts and unit histories from the brutal Okinawa campaign. While names and exact dates blur in the fog of war in the passing decades, the core events are corroborated by multiple sources. A flight of American carrier-based fighters, likely F-6, F-Hellcats or F-4U Corsairs from the USS Essex or a similar vessel, was engaged in a fighter sweep over the northern part of Okinawa, clearing the sky of Japanese aircraft. They encountered a mixed group of Japanese fighters-Asian but nimble Zeros and the newer, more dangerous Shinkai. George. In the frantic turning fight that followed, an American pilot, let's call him Lieutenant Jack for the narrative, found himself locked in a twisting duel with a particularly skilled Japanese aviator. They dove, climbed, and rolled, each trying to get the lethal few seconds of gunsight Piper on the other's cockpit. Tracers flashed between the canopies. Then, a burst of fire found its mark on both planes, almost simultaneously. The American's Hellcat took hits in the engine, oil spraying over the windscreen. The Japanese Zero or similar aircraft had its fuel lines severed or controls damaged. Both aircraft, mortally wounded, trailed smoke as they fell from the sky. Their pilots fighting not each other now, but the physics of a dead machine. In a scene repeated thousands of times in the Pacific, both men aimed for the only patch of semi-level ground they could see at terrestrial side. Part of a small war-ravaged farmland, crash-landed in a brutal skidding tumble of tearing metal and thrown earth. Miraculously, both survived the impact. What happened next diverges from the standard narrative of a pilot evading capture or being immediately taken prisoner. These two men, having just tried to kill each other in the impersonal, high-altitude domain of aviation, now found themselves in the same small, intimate valley. The American, bruised and shaken, crawled from his crumpled cockpit, his .45 sidearm, his only weapon. He would have been trained to evade, to head for the coast and hope for rescue by a submarine or patrol craft. The Japanese pilot, perhaps an officer from a Samari-descended family, or simply a man carrying the traditional sword many Japanese officers bore as a symbol of authority and heritage, had also survived. He emerged from his wreckage with his katana. In the eerie silence following the cacophony of the dogfight and crash broken only by the crackle of fires and the distant thunder of the front lines, these two warriors became aware of each other's presence. This was no longer a war of nations or ideologies. It was a personal feud that had literally fallen to earth. There are accounts that suggest the Japanese pilot, adhering to a code that saw surrender as the ultimate dishonor, actively sought out his American counterpart to finish the fight on his own terms. The American, realizing evasion was impossible, prepared to defend himself. The confrontation that followed was a surreal collision of epics. The Japanese officer, perhaps giving a short, traditional shout, banzai, or a challenge, charged across the muddy field. His katana raised. The American lieutenant, with no melee training and facing a closing enemy with a razor-sharp blade, drew his M1911 pistol. The pistol, a powerful but short-range weapon designed for stopping power rather than accuracy in a frantic duel, was his only equalizer. The first shots rang out loud, jarring reports in the pastoral setting. It's unlikely this was a calm, dueling pace exchange. It was a desperate, close-quarters life-and-death struggle. Did the Americans' bullets find their mark as the officer closed the distance? Did the Japanese pilot swing his sword, forcing the American to dodge and fire again. Veteran accounts that mention this incident suggest the fight was brief, brutal, and decisive. The technology of the 20th century, in the form of the semi-automatic pistol, ultimately prevailed over the centuries-old symbol of the samurai. The Japanese pilot fell. The American, possibly wounded by a glancing sword cut or simply in a state of profound shock, now had to process what had just happened. He had transitioned from a pilot to an infantryman in a duel to the death in the span of minutes. He would have secured the officer as sort of prized war, and likely taken any identification before continuing his evasion. The weight of the personal kill adding to the trauma of being shot down behind enemy lines. The aftermath of this encounter is as shadowy as the event itself. The American pilot likely evaded capture for some time, eventually being recovered by friendly forces or Filipino guerrillas. The story would have been told and retold in his squadron's ready room, a wild tale that stood out even amidst the daily horrors of the campaign. The Japanese pilot's fate was sealed on that hillside. His body left where it fell, his katana beginning a journey to perhaps a veteran's mantelpiece in America. A silent testament to the duel. This story resonates because it encapsulates the entire Pacific War in a single, Biolin Bignet. It had the advanced technology of carrier aviation and the enduring, deadly tradition of the warrior's blade. It had the impersonal nature of modern war, crashing into the most personal confrontation possible. While the historical record may not have preserved the exact names, the incident is emblematic of the ferocious close quarters and often culturally fraught nature of the fighting on Okinawa, where the Japanese military's ethos of Bushido met the pragmatic, overwhelming material force of America. This last duel serves as a powerful metaphor. It was the end of one kind of warfare, the kind with rituals and personal honor between warriors, and the harsh reality of total war, where survival, not ceremony, was the only rule. It reminds us that beneath the grand strategy and the industrial scale of World War II, the conflict was always ultimately about individuals in moments of extreme terror and courage, sometimes fighting battles that felt ancient, even as the world around them burned with modern fire.